Yo, what's happening people, and welcome back to the channel. Recently I've been making a lot of chill beats, so in today's video I'm going to be switching it up and showing you how you can make a hard New York drill beat for someone like Fiveo, Foreign or Millyz. If you're new to the channel, then please consider hitting the subscribe button and click the bell next to it too, so you can be notified every time that I upload new content. Now with all that stuff out the way, let's jump straight into it. So I started this beat off with this ambient key sound from Analog Lab. The preset that I chose is called Second Hand, and if I come in and just look at the pattern, you're going to see that I've kept it very simple. I'm actually only using 2 notes in each chord, and these types of chords are also known as dyads. I've got my root note playing throughout the whole thing, and then I just figured out these top notes by using my ear and then placing them down to keep things interesting. To this, I then added half time, and I've got my loop setting on 1 bar, and I've took this effect style all the way to the left. What this is going to do is introduce the dry signal to the end of each bar and just add some extra movement to the chords. I then added Valhalla Vintage Verb, and I'm using the default preset, and the only thing I changed here was the mix, which I've turned down to 8%. Then lastly I added an EQ to take out some of the lower end frequencies and to control some of the harsh frequencies around 1500 Hz. For the next sound, I stayed inside Analog Lab, and this time I went for the AE Untitled 4 preset. I've got this layer playing an exact copy of my first chords, and again I'm using an EQ to cut out some of the low frequencies, and I'm using half time, but this time I've got it set to sustain. And now that I've got both of my chord layers stacked up, they sound like this. To add my counter melody, I went to Ana 2, and I'm using the Lo-Fi Piano 2 preset. A lot of these presets inside Ana 2 come with multiple oscillators, and this one had a lot of noise on it. So to turn that down or to turn it off completely, you want to come over to this oscillators mix tab, and from there you can find the sound that you don't like and either turn it down or mute it completely. Looking at the pattern, you'll see that I've kept this one really simple, and I'm just using these semitone or half step intervals to really achieve that dark sound that I'm looking for. For effects on this, I've got an EQ that's just cutting out some low frequencies. Next up I added guitar rig, and I'm using my favourite preset, Vocal Space. This is then going into an effect rack, and I'm using the large lush verb preset. And lastly I've got an auto filter that I'm using for some automation in the main arrangement, but I'll go over that in a bit more detail later in the video. So here's how the counter melody sounds once all of those effects have been applied. And the last melodic element I added to this beat was some vocals, and for this I went to Contact and used the Vocalize bank. I've actually froze this down to audio so I can use one of my favourite effects for vocals, and that effect is Little Altar Boy. I find that when I'm using sampled vocals, these formant shifting plugins can introduce a lot of harsh, nasty frequencies, so bouncing your MIDI down to audio will help combat this. You'll still find that shifting the formant too much is going to add some distortion to your vocals, but they're much easier to work with in an audio format rather than MIDI. I've got my formant setting on 2.4, and I've brought the mix right down to make the effect nice and subtle and to make sure I don't run into any of that distortion. So now that all the melodic elements have been added, here's how the full melody sounds. In this beat, I decided to add 2 hi-hats, both of which are doing a different job. The first hi-hat that I added plays throughout the whole loop, and it's just playing a regular 2-step drill pattern. I then just added these rolls, which are shifting down in pitch and velocity, and this is just going to help add some bounce to the loop. A quick tip for Ableton users: if you come into the simpler or sampler and go into the control section, you'll see this setting that's labeled ran pan. What this setting is going to do is add some randomization to the panning of the sample. I tend to use this on pretty much all of my hi-hats, and this is just another way to add some bounce into the loop. The effects on this layer are very simple. I've just got an EQ8 that's cutting out some of the unneeded low frequencies. Then I'm just using a chorus plugin, which is going to make the hi-hat sound a bit more thick. The second hi-hat that I added is only playing on the back end of each 4 bars, and this is going to add a subtle call and response feel to the drums. The pattern that this hi-hat's playing is the exact same as the first one, and I just chose a different sample. All of the effects are the same on this as the first hi-hat. I've just increased the randomization on my velocity plugin, and I've increased the mix on my chorus plugin. Now when I play these 2 hi-hats together, they sound like this. Next up, I added an open hi-hat, and this is just playing on the 4th beat of certain bars. I didn't add any effects to this layer, but what I did do is randomize the panning like I did to the other hi-hats. For my snare, I picked quite a punchy drum sample, and I've just got this playing the regular drill pattern where the first snare hits on the 3rd beat of the first bar and the second snare hits on the last beat of the second bar. Then at the end of each 4 bars, I've just added these double hits and shifted the velocity as well as the pitch. Next, I added some percussion, and for this beat I went with a rim sound as well as a bongo. The rim sound's playing quite a fast pattern with some double hits, and again I've just adjusted the velocity. And the bongo's playing on the 3rd beat of the 2nd bar and the 1st beat of the 7th bar. And on the bongo sound I just added some delay with the ping pong setting on, so that's going to just pan slightly left and right. The last drum element that I added was of course the kick, and for this I just pressed record and played this pattern in to complete the drums. Now onto the 808, I chose a nice long sample, so when I'm adding my slides, the sample doesn't cut out. This pattern's pretty much just following the root notes from the chord progression, and I've just added in these occasional slides. I like to use quite big jumps when I'm programming my 808s, so you'll see that I'm quite often going over a full octave. Another good tip for Ableton users is when you're designing slides, you want to first work out where you want your slide to end up, and then you can hold Alt to bend it. And what this is going to do is allow you some extra control over the curve of the slide. So now I'm just going to quickly go over the arrangement before I show you how the full beat turned out. For this beat I went with a 16-bar intro, and I've just got the first chords playing through the first 8 bars, and then I introduced the second chords during the second 8 bars. After 4 bars I've got my vocals coming in, and I'm just using an auto filter to help sweep that into the 8-bar mark. During the second 8 bars of my intro I introduced the hi-hat, and then 4 bars before the main beat drops I bring in the counter melody. And here I'm using the same technique with the auto filter, and this is just going to help sweep this in to where the main drop starts. During the first 8 bars of the hook I've got all of my elements playing without any changes to them. Then in the second 8 bars you'll see that I've dropped out a lot of the drum elements, and I also filtered out a lot of the melody to make room for one of these big 808 slides. So like I do in most of my beats, I've dropped the kick out for the whole verse, and I've just made a more simple version of the 808. I've also added this delayed drop with the hi-hats only coming in after 2 bars and then the snare coming in shortly after that. The counter melody's also been taken out for the entirety of the verse, and I've just introduced the vocals in the second 8 bars. Then lastly I added in a pre-hook or a bridge, and this is playing an even more simplified version of the 808 along with both sets of chords, the counter melody and the vocals. Again, I'm using an auto filter on my counter melody to help sweep that back into the main hook, and then I'm using a kilohertz tape stop plugin to add some emphasis to the drop. So that's how I arranged the beat. Now let's take a listen to the whole thing. So that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. I can't lie, I'm feeling this one and I think it came out crazy. So let me know what your opinions are in the comments section. Remember, if you like the drum samples that are used in this beat, then you can pre-order the Phoenix kit and receive those pre-order bonuses by using the link in the video description. If you enjoyed this video or if you learned anything new from it, then make sure to hit the thumbs up before you leave. And if you're new to the channel, then do me a favor and turn that subscribe button grey. If you're still here at the end of the video, then massive shout out to you, man. I honestly appreciate it a lot. So thanks again for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.